So some of the issues that I think are very important for us to consider in our local culture, obviously in Northern Ireland, a big one is the fact that we live in a divided society. And so therefore we have to think, how do we communicate the gospel in that divided society? What does it mean? For example, when I worked for a peace project, trying to build bridges across different communities, the pastor of one church said in a meeting, of course we have to think, is our mission to just half of this town? And issues like that we don't often think about. Another big question in mission that has been from the times of the New Testament is, do other people have to become like us in order to become Christians? So in the New Testament, the question was, do Gentiles have to become Jewish in order to become Christian? And the church decided, no, they don't. Missionaries engaging in foreign mission, do foreign converts have to become like the missionary? And in colonial times, perhaps that was the attitude, but we've moved beyond that now and realise that's wrong. In Northern Ireland, do they, the other community, have to become like us? Do you have to become a unionist to become a Christian, to become part of this church? We haven't addressed those sorts of questions. So I'm interested in that. I'm also interested that our culture is changing. We're very acutely aware of this. We're entering what's called post-Christendom. Church numbers are declining. People are not going to church. This is no longer a Christian country. How do we as church cope with that? How do we communicate the gospel within that? The same old ways of doing it won't work. So I'm interested in exploring how we communicate, what forms of church are relevant for people, what forms of spirituality do people need. So I think those sorts of issues are huge. And there are other big cultural shifts that are coming along at the moment, like the rise of nationalism, populism, are going to have a huge effect on culture. And how are we as churches going to respond to those things? Yeah, so I guess my biggest area of interest is in that area of gospel and culture, and recognising that the culture around us is changing. So what we think, what we do, how we engage is going to have to develop and change. So I guess I feel that no part of my life is separated from any other part of my life. My theology, my academic theology, if you want to put it in that box, is not separated from my ministry, which is not separated from Peter the person. Peter the person has been formed and is being formed through a whole set of relations. Obviously your family comes into that. And a big part for me has been married to my wife Åsa, who's from Sweden. So even within our own family relationship, we've got different cultures and different relationships going on within there, and again that has just enriched and developed me as a person, and therefore flows into my theology and my ministry and everything. We also, I've been brought up within the Presbyterian Church, so that's been very formational for me. But over the last lot of years, the experience of being a minister in this changed context made me look at the church, made me look at myself and my own faith in this changing culture. And the changing culture has affected my faith. It has made me think differently about certain things, and I guess in a way that I think has enriched me. It has also helped me explore different spiritualities, different forms of spirituality. So I'm part of a community that draws from Celtic spirituality a lot, so from the ancient Irish, Scottish traditions, and recognising that there are strands and different ways of expressing prayer and things like that have become quite important for me, and help me deal with just the different aspects of life. And also I've been part of a group that's been into exploring intentional community, so living 4 couples living together in a small area for a few years, and exploring life and the rhythm of prayer together over that time has been quite formational. So I guess I'm personally constantly exploring appropriate ways I guess the way I would put it, of living a faithful life. And yeah, still doing that, still exploring that. I'm wanting to see what's coming next. The key theologian who's influenced me has been Leslie Newbigin, and I first came across him when I was studying at Selly College, preparing to go overseas. I was in my early 20s. I hadn't done any formal theological training before, and they said you're having this lecture from a person who I'd never heard of. Leslie Newbigin at that stage was in his 80s, so he was quite an old man, but when he spoke, he gave us a lecture on Western culture and the gospel, and it absolutely blew my mind. I was blown away by what he was saying about how relevant it was, and I hadn't heard anything like this before. So I got that one lecture, and it wasn't until about 7 or 8 years later, when I was studying a theology degree, that I realised just how significant a figure I had been listening to. And I read more of his writings, and it became more and more influential for me. And eventually I ended up doing my PhD on Leslie Newbigin. And so I would say he's, in a sense, the bedrock of my understanding of gospel and culture and theology and those sorts of things. Okay, so yeah, I guess I've done quite a few things in my time. I haven't had the same job for more than 5 years at any point in my life. So it's been a bit of chop and changing, but the main blocks of it have been working in Nepal overseas. So that was in total for 6 years, but that was over three 2-year blocks over a period of about 10 years. So Nepal taught me a lot about, well, various things. I think that have been formational. An obvious one would be the crossing cultures in mission, and all of the issues that are involved with that. So how you understand a new culture, how you relate to it as a person, then how the gospel is communicated between a person of one culture and another culture, and the dynamics that there are between those two. So I think I learned a lot in practice about those things. I learned a lot from Nepali Christians about their perspectives on the gospel, from their culture, that helped me then to examine mine as well. It being a desperately poor country, obviously issues of social justice, development, and even how the gospel relates to economic structures became very important. And I saw in development work, good development work, whether done by Christians or non-Christians, includes a lot of the values that would be central to the gospel anyway. And so learning from secular development workers about the importance of empowering people, of recognizing that people have potential within themselves for their own development, actually is a very good missiological practice for developing a local church. So the principles are the same. So that provided a lot of experience, and again, a deepening of a lot of things that I don't think I would have got in any other way. So Nepal was very formational in all sorts of ways. And then I came back and I worked in a church in Limerick in Ireland, which was a multi-ethnic congregation. So we had about 20 nationalities and a congregation of about 70 to 90 on a Sunday morning. So a very eclectic congregation. And I think the cross-cultural experience that I had before helped me do that and to negotiate some of the tensions between different communities within that church, but also to experience the benefits again of a varied bunch of people working together. That was obviously in the Republic of Ireland. The Protestant church is a small minority, and this was a United Presbyterian Methodist congregation. So the two churches in the town had come together to form one church. And that taught me a lot about the importance of unity in the church, because the fact that two churches had come together voluntarily, when people heard about that in the town, it made a noticeable difference. Many people are put off by divisions and splits they see between churches. And it was noticeable the reaction that people had to hear of a uniting church. So that taught me a lot. It's made me more sensitive to the divisions that we have and the importance of unity. So that was significant. And then in East Belfast, working in a congregation in East Belfast that was on the edge of two loyalist housing estates, we were very much involved in the local community. And there, I think a big lesson I learned was the importance not of doing mission, community work, whatever, for the local community, but doing it with the local community. Again, maybe that's the lessons coming back from development work in Nepal. But we, as a church and the local Church of Ireland, deliberately formed a forum with the local community centre, the local primary school, the local housing associations, what would you call them, the local groups that are involved in the community, just all of them working together. And that made a big difference. Churches had previously been seen as a bit separate from the community. Yes, we did good work, but it was the churches doing it from here into here. Over a period of time, the churches were seen again as part of the local community, and that opened a whole range of opportunities. So I think I think my experience has been that each stage of my life has led to the next, and lessons from the previous are applied in the next as well. Each stage is important on its own, but also each stage is a preparation for the next stage, which is quite interesting. And I guess I hope now that the various experiences that I've had are now combining into my teaching of mission and church. I don't want to be overly pessimistic, but when I was ministering in a church, I'm working extremely hard and working with a congregation that was working extremely hard. I guess I came to a point where I felt this isn't working as I had expected or hoped. And that led to a long period of reflection and wondering and thinking. And I produced a short booklet on my reflections, and I came to the conclusion that the best biblical metaphor for where the church is at the moment is the period of exile at the end of the Old Testament. When the people of Israel had a long period of being in their own country with a king who was following, meant of at least nominally following Yahweh, the religion of the country, and you had a temple which worship was centralized and the whole country was organized around that. And then suddenly taken out of that into Babylon, into exile, suddenly in a nation that does not recognize the same gods, is promoting other gods. A people who are defeated, depressed, who wonder if they've completely lost it, wonder if their God has been defeated, and asking the question, how do we even worship God when worship is meant to be in the temple and the temple is being destroyed? And yet they learn how to worship, and they develop a new way of life. They develop a synagogue worship, and they continue the faith, and eventually they're brought back. To me, that feels like where the church is at here. We were at the centre of a society that was built around Christianity. We did have influence and power in that, but that is gone. There's a crisis of faith. We don't quite know how to live in this new situation with a world that doesn't hold our values. So what are the opportunities? I think the opportunities are how to learn to live as a people without power, without a lot of influence. And that's going to be uncomfortable because that's not a nice place to be. But actually, as I read the exile story and as I read Christ speaking, I think there's something about that's where the church actually should be. So I'm not predicting, it may come, I'm not predicting mass revival and us getting back to where we were in society, but maybe it's a smaller, more humble, and a witness that is from below rather than from above. So that's been my thinking over the last while. And since I've been discovered, I'm not the only person thinking in terms of exile. There's quite a few other people thinking in those terms as well out there. So why is mission still important? Well, it is not relevant in the way it has been expressed in the past. It is not relevant for churches to continue with a view that mission is from the powerful to the powerless. It is not something that we do from our position of superior knowledge, benefits, etc., to these poor deprived people over here. I think we've got to move away from that to a mission that is more recognising that we do not have that influence, that power, and therefore, in a sense, allowing God to work. I think if we don't engage with the issues of the way the world has changed around us in the West, then I think we are doomed to decline, doomed to be irrelevant and out of touch. But I think we need a courageous and a humble approach. I also think there's been a big change as well in culture. I mean, we talk about postmodern truth, and I think the natural Christian reaction to postmodernity that's talking of truth is to say it's terrible, it rejects objective truth, etc., etc. I think that's a bit simplistic. I think we have we've been too self-assured in our grasp of truth. If God is God, then we are never going to fully grasp God. So we need to have a bit of humility. If truth is not just a set of propositions, but if truth is a person, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If truth is a person, you know a person in a different way than you know a set of propositions. And that maybe we need to develop a way of relating to truth, to the person that is emphasizes that relational aspect more. And I think a lot of non-church people will respond to that sort of thing a bit better, to an invitation to a relationship with a person, rather than having to sign up to a set of propositions that, don't sound so good. And it allows people then to enter into a journey to get to know a person. So I think rather than just rejecting some of the stuff that is out there, without compromising what we actually do hold as core and true, sometimes a change in perspective can help us regain something that we've lost, this aspect of truth as relational, that's good for us to relearn. Um, but it might also help us connect better with the people around us, um, as they will resonate that. I think a lot of people out, who are not within the church, they don't want someone to tell them what to believe, but many are open to exploring belief. And I don't think we compromise anything by allowing people to enter that journey of exploration, especially if it is centered around getting to know Christ. That's why I think thinking about all of these things, it may be complex, it may be difficult, but I think it's important not just for us in our mission outreach, but it might actually help us gain some new insights for ourselves.